Hi, this is Joe Rabil with Rabil Stock Research. So I like to start with a lesson, and what I'm going to do this week is incorporate that into some analysis on the sectors. I meant to cover them last week, but got caught up because we had so many different things we were covering. So I'm going to do some analysis on the sectors using the simple 18 MA in multiple time frames to show you how this can be applied. It can be applied to the market, general indices. It can be applied to individual stocks, but it can really help you kind of zero in on which areas to be focused on. All right. And then what we'll do from there is we'll take a hard look at the indices and we'll look at a few other things. And then we'll look at the symbol requests that came through. Before I get going, I do want to mention there is a YouTube channel out there impersonating me. If you see a thumbnail that's promising big gains or anything like that, then you know that's not me. But also, the reason why I'm bringing it up, especially there's an email address on there, and I don't know what kind of scam they might be running. I do not have a Gmail address. All right, only joe@rabilstockresearch.com is the only way you contact me. So if it's anything different, then you know that's not the right channel. All right, so just be aware of that. Okay, let's start with the, we've got our grid up. I've got a monthly chart in the bottom left, weekly bottom right, daily in the upper right, and then I've got another weekly chart. I wanted to show the relative strength. So this is a 30-period moving average of the relative strength line, which is the line that's switching back from black and red. When it's red, it's underperforming the S&P. When it's black, it's outperforming. So you can see the shifts, the quick shifts that take place. That's why we want to throw a moving average up there. All right, now what I want to do is I want to just explain kind of how I read these moving averages, and I think it can help you kind of really zero in on what time frame you should be focused on and whether which areas are the strongest. All right, and the RS will help with that. But let's just start with this basic materials XLB. First thing we notice is that we're still well below the 18-month line. All right, we had a move from what was about 90 down to 75 or something like that, and we've had a pretty substantial rally, but we're not back above the 18-month. And you can also see that 18-month is defining this sort of prior area. This was a pivotal area where it broke above and then failed to hold with this big red bar coming down through, and then rallied up to it and failed, and now came back down, and now it's rallying back up towards it again. So I kind of view that 90 area as being fairly strong resistance, something that we need to be on the lookout for, especially because the relative strength line isn't, as this has moved up, the relative strength line is actually dropping off a little bit. So it's showing that this isn't, the price is actually being pulled up by the market a little bit. That's how I would read this specific sector. Now, if we go and we look at the weekly chart, we are getting back above that and it's flattening out, but it's not rising. So we're breaking the downtrend line. So a lot of times the 18-week will define the downtrend line, or the 18 on any time frame will define the downtrend line. We've broken that, but we need a little bit of work here because this line needs to turn to the upside. Volume at the low was pretty significant, suggesting there's a significant amount of support down there at 75 or 80. But that doesn't mean that it's going to keep going because the volume hasn't continued to expand. So we got kind of a climatic low you can see on the daily chart. Now the daily chart has started to move higher, but we only have a flat weekly line. So I don't really see a confluence in time frames, but if I'm looking for something, I'd probably be looking for a little bit more of a push on the weekly and then a pullback and look for a setup on the daily chart. But this is not a sector that really is showing that much strength. Now I'm going to go through some of these others. Now look at XLC. Pulls back and holds the 18-month. Not only is it not rallying up to the breakdown point, it never broke down. And it came down to that 18-month and got a boomerang bounce to the upside. Look at the relative strength in this. The trend is continuing to be higher. Now, we've got a flat weekly here as well. What I think would be ideal is if this spent another week or two kind of working sideways and this cups around underneath. If it played out that way, I think that would be pretty bullish. Now, the other way it could play out if we get a pullback is it could overrun the 18-week line. If it does that, then we kind of want to see it get back up through this prior high. However, if I'm looking for individual stocks, I'm focused in on this sector. This sector is showing strength. It's a leader. And even though the sector chart might look like it needs a little bit of work to set up as a buy, you could find individual stocks in a leadership group. All right. So this is an area that I'd be focused on. Now let's go to XLRE. I'm doing these in order, in alphabetical order. So look at the weakness in XLE. New low and relative strength. Clean break, fresh break of the 18-month line. Now we're rallying up to a declining 18-week. All right, we're below the 18-month and we're not even rallying, and we're rallying to a declining 18-week line, and now it looks like we're trying to break the 18-day. I mean, this is not a sector we should be all that focused on. Now, if we break the sector down, and this is what I do for my subscribers, you can see that the midstream area is doing something completely different than this chart, as well as the gas stocks in this sector. So we can split those off and look at those individual industry groups, but as a sector, this is still a tough area to be focused on. All right, look at the XLF. I think this has been one of the stronger sectors. I know it's pulling back a little bit on a relative basis recently, but look at the boomerang bounce off the 18 months, still rising, never broke it. Now we're back above the 18 week, and similar to XLC, I'd like to see this work sideways for 2 or 3 weeks. You get this big volatility move down and back up. Normally we'd like to see a little bit of consolidation. If it can hold the 50, high 40s area during that consolidation, you should find a lot of individual stock ideas that look attractive in this sector. So another area to be focused on, again, because we're showing good relative performance and also the trend is in line. We want both. We want trend and relative strength to confirm. Another area that I think looks fantastic and is showing in the most recent move off the low, I'm seeing more stocks. I go through every single sector, basically all the stocks in the sector down to 300 million in market cap, and I could not believe this week how many of these stocks in the industry industrials that just looked like massive breakout moves or extended runs off the low. And I think they need to consolidate. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I don't know that I would chase them, but I would be watching these for pullback. Look at what's going on a relative basis, breaking out, held the 18-month. It did get below it, but by the end of the month got back up. So the slope of the 18-month is still rising. Now you can see we're a little stretched away from the 18-week. So any kind of a pullback or something like that, I think would look really attractive. XLK also got back. Now this closed below for 2 months. It closed below, but if you notice, we got back above, and the slope of the 18-month is still rising. And we've gotten improvement since the low on a relative basis. Now, here's what I'll say about this sector. When I go through the list, there's a lot of stocks that don't look all that great. They look like rallies into resistance, but then there's a whole other host of stocks that have held up well relative to the sector. And I think you can go stock picking in this sector. There's enough stocks in this sector that look attractive that I wouldn't just say, hey, this had too big of a drop. It's got too much resistance in the sector chart. I think once you dig down and look under the hood, you'll see that there are some stocks, some pretty quality stocks that have made really nice moves or even held up really well during the pullback and are looking very attractive. And then some fresh breakouts in some of these as well. So, but when we look at this chart, we're above the 18-month and we're above the 18-week. The 18-week needs to cup around. It needs a little bit of work. But you can see this is one with the improvement in the relative strength. Again, another sector we should be focusing in on. XLP has been a really good trend chart. You see how it's been flat sideways while the market was going down, and that's why this relative strength line was going up. Now it's pulling back and it's reaching kind of crunch time. If this doesn't break out above this short-term resistance area, I think the relative strength is going to keep dropping. So we're going to need to see some strength in the consumer staples here, I think, pretty soon, or we're going to lose the relative strength. So I still think it's an area you could be watching because we're at a pretty pivotal area in the market. It's coming up to the 6,000 mark and, on the S&P, and it very possibly could start to consolidate or pull back. All right. So if that's the case, then some of these might break out. Still an area probably worth watching. Now, look at what's going on with the real estate sector. It's pulled back and kind of retraced a little too much. it's a little lazy in the way that it's forming. The good news is there's a lot of support at 40. So I don't dislike this sector, but I don't think it's a leader. All right. I don't know that I'm looking at, the XLF, XLI, XLK right now, XLC. Those are the areas that seem to have the most leadership names that I'd be focusing in on. Look at XLU. Another one that has a really good look, held the 18-month, got a real big bounce. And again, if we can get this to turn up here and show a little bit of strength in the short term, then we're going to survive on a relative basis too. Still worth watching some of these stocks. A lot of them have pulled back recently, a little harsh. You can see the gap down here. So I think that buys us a little bit of time to see how they're going to act here over the next, over the next 2 to 4 weeks to see if they're going to set up or not. Now, I think one of the weakest sectors is what is really the weakest sector right now is the healthcare as a sector. We're hitting a new low here. We're well below the 18-month. That line's probably going to start rolling over, and it's not even rallying up to it, below a decline. So we're breaking an 18-month that's starting to roll. We're below an 18-week that we haven't even rallied to, and we're below an 18-day. And we're hitting new relative strength lows. Not an area we want to be focused on. Now, there's a few stocks that I'm following. If you're stock picking, you can find a few that look pretty attractive. But by and large, this sector does not look all that great. And then finally, let's just look at XLY. Look at how that came back. You see how that got back above the 18-month line without losing any slope. Now, here's the issue we've got. Look at the slope of this line, where most of these stocks we've been talking about in the stronger areas, this has started to cup around or flatten out. That has not happened here on this sector, on this XLY. So I want to see this walk it out a little bit more, and if that happens, this should cup around underneath. If we don't get a real sharp pullback anytime soon, then this could set itself up, but it needs a little bit of time. Even the leadership areas could use a little bit of a breather here, but something like this with the declining 18-week, I think definitely falls into that camp. If you're enjoying the content, hit that like button and also subscribe. So my services can be found at rabilstockresearch.com. I'm on the services page right now. You can see at the top, I've got the advanced trend and momentum courses individually priced for lifetime access. Plus you could buy them as a bundle at a discount. And then also the individual package has about 2 to 3 reports each week, plus a special video commentary each week for that package. Also, if you're new to this approach and you want to just learn more about it, you can start with the book I'm offering at a discount right now. As always, my comments are for educational purposes only. Please do your own due diligence before making any decisions. So I've got a lot of symbol requests that came through this week. I want to cover every one of them. But first, we're going to take a hard look at the QQQ and the IWM. So similar to what we were talking about with the sectors, you see how this came back and got back above and closed back above the 18-month line, even though it was way down. And notice where it came down to. It came down to the prior breakout area in this big round number at 400. So we got to view that as a good sign. And the reason why it's so positive is because we don't lose any slope to this line. It's not rolling over. Like if this were moving up and the 18-month were starting to flatten, then I would view this much more negatively. All right. Now we do have this crossover of the signal line. So typically that means we get some hesitation, potentially another test of this 18 line in any time frame. That can happen in any time frame. So we want to be on the lookout for some type of a retracement and see if it can hold the 18-week area somewhere in that 18 to 40 week area. If that happens, I think that would be a pretty positive sign. Notice the improvement on a relative basis. This is almost hitting another new high relative on this rally since the low. Really since April, we've really started to move up on a relative basis in this NASDAQ 100. All right. IWM has done the opposite. If we look at the relative, it's being pulled up. So this has made this big move, but the relative line is actually not improving at all. It's really being helped by the market. So not necessarily a great sign that we're broadening out. And we got to be a little bit more careful from that standpoint, especially because this index is still has failed to get back above the 18-month line. So good sign that it's at least rallying. It's not going the opposite way, but it isn't participating in a way that we consider to be a leader. And I think that would be a little bit better sign overall. All right, let's look at Bitcoin. I had a couple of requests for some of these cryptos. So let's take a look at Bitcoin. And ideally, we had the zero line reversal on the weekly. So first of all, on a monthly chart, we've been showing a lot of strength, MACD holding, and really good momentum characteristics based on the ADX. Now, we have had a pinch play inside the range, and then we had one at the after the breakout or at the breakout area, and then we've had another one now trigger. So, we got to be a little bit more careful now that we've had two of those, basically two pullbacks, two bull flags after a move. We should be looking for, after this run is over, we should be looking for more of a complex correction or consolidation. But we do have good relative performance here. And what I'd be watching for to really give us an entry on this setup is a pullback here down closer to 100,000. I think if we get that in the form of a pinch or some type of a little higher low on the MACD where it holds the signal line and this pulls back that way, I think we have to take that seriously. Now, the way I would look to enter, and this is covered in my course obviously in detail, but if we got a 2 to 3 week pullback or pause back down to that level, we should get an opposing trend pattern on this time frame where the 18 is actually crossing down below the 40 and the MACD is coming back down through zero, and that would set up a potential opportunity. I think that's what I'd be looking for when I look at this chart. It just feels a little overbought right now. I know it's very strong, but if we're looking for quality entry, that's what I would be watching for. ETH, not so strong, right? We're rallying up. This is almost like comparing the QQQ to the IWM, right? I mean, this is still below the 18-month line. It's gotten a little bit of strength here, but look at the strength to the downside based on the ADX reading. Now, that very well could be a climatic sign. I'm not saying that we're going to go back and go to new lows or anything, but it just tells me there's probably some resistance up here as we get closer to 3,000. Now, maybe it makes it there. We could get a little trade from here to where it is. Momentum is decent on this time frame, and we have worked off a little bit of this consolidation. So wouldn't be surprised to get a little bit of a pop, but then I think it's going to get a little bit tougher. All right, let's look at this Canadian Goose, because this is they have goosed this. This is showing some real strength. And what I love about this pattern is we've had this kind of declining trend line. And MACD has been hovering below the zero line, right? But look at what ADX has been doing. We've had a low ADX condition now for quite some time, basically about a year. And look at the breakout in green DI. It's causing the blue ADX line to start moving. And look at the volume pattern on the breakout. So, the way I'm looking at this is that we essentially just broke the downtrend line. Now, we want to look for some kind of an entry point, I think, on a pullback. The earnings caused the move. We should get some kind of a higher low to form. My subscribers know in this situation, a lot of times I'm looking at the RSI on the daily chart to set up a buying opportunity. If we got an RSI buy, I'd probably consider it because it's so close to support here. And look at the way the relative strength line is starting to kick in. Really good stock to keep an eye on. This is the type of turnaround I think we want to start looking to follow. All right, let's look at CRK. So now this has some gas associated with it. I'm not sure. Like it's a gas stock. It might actually be one because it's trading like one. We've had this consolidation and we're breaking out. I would be looking for a little bit of a check back, pull back to the 18-week, to the breakout area. This is definitely another stock with the new momentum on the daily chart to be keeping a close eye on. Really attractive look. Big breakout too. And look at the ADX on the monthly chart with the MACD crossing above the zero line as well. All good signs there. All right, FSM. So, we've got some of these metals that are kind of late bloomers that are kicking in, but the pattern themselves look pretty good. We're actually getting an RSI buy signal here for the first time since this correction started. And so that's a good sign that confirms what we're seeing with the 18-month holding and the ADX crossing above the 25 line. We're still in a low ADX condition here. I probably, because of the way, so one of the things I like to point out is that if this move would have caused the ADX to get going, then we could get really serious about buying this pullback. Now I think I would probably look for a little bit more confirmation. I want to see some strength develop in the ADX. We don't really have that in either one of these time frames, so that would be preferable before looking to enter. Okay, GRRR. Not a bad pattern. One of the things that bothers me a little bit, though, is that we formed, I call it like a dunce cap. You see how if we get a little pointed head here, you see how this formed a move to the upside where we move up and then we come back down, and it takes that shape of a pointed head. All right. That normally means what I do when I see that is I typically will look at the midpoint, and I think 30 is pretty good resistance. Now, there could be some money to be made on the smaller time frames, right? If I can get a setup here and play it up to 30, but I got to make sure the risk reward makes sense if I'm going to do that. So know it as look at it as a trading play. I do recognize what's going on the monthly, but I'm just telling you, the volume was kind of heavy on the pullback. And I don't like the way the vertical move of the decline, so we got to give that a little bit more time to play out. Now, HIMS is a really strong stock. Notice what's happened on the monthly, though. We created a big spike, and we're potentially creating another one here, sort of telling me that this 60 level is a bit of a problem in the short term. So what I would be looking for is a little bit more of a better test of the 18-week. I think if that's successful, then I would take this a lot more seriously. If it comes down hard and looks like it almost forms a double top, then you can give it a lot of breathing room. But either way, the MACD crossing down on the daily chart is telling us we probably need to give this a little bit of time. It's probably going to form some kind of a double bottom. We need to see if it can survive that, especially based on these little tails that have formed on the monthly candlesticks. Okay, let's look at SLB. So this is what I'm talking about with the energy area. You see how we're getting this declining trend below. See the trend line and the 18 are the same? This is what I was talking about before. So the 18 does a really good job of defining the trend. Until that line is broken, I don't think we see any longer term improvement. The only thing you could look for is maybe a quick trade, but not really anything that attracts me in this. I don't see anything all that attractive even on the short term pattern. Heavy, big bar to the downside on heavy volume, and we haven't had a rally from that. So just be careful here until we get a little bit more substance to the bottoming pattern. All right. And then finally, this TXRH. So this is what we want to be on the lookout for. You see this strength? You see how this held here? Now, we have formed a MACD crossover, but this is very strong. So the way I read this is that the bias is to the upside, but in the short term, we could check back. All right, so I know the person that asked about this is already in this stock. What you need to allow for is this to pull back, because I think it will. I think we'll get some kind of a hesitation or pullback. As long as if you don't have a tight stop, you should be fine, because I do think we're going to get a little bit of a hesitation, pullback, pause, something like that in the near term over the next 2 to 4 weeks, something most likely. But I think overall, I think this looks really attractive. And I know there's a little bit of resistance up there, but I don't see that much in the way this is playing out. Relative strength is holding up really well. Overall, really, really good pattern with good momentum characteristics. Thanks for watching today. If you have any stock requests, you can send them to stocktalk@stockcharts.com or just put them in the comment area below. Also, if you want to learn more about some of these techniques, you can go to my YouTube channel. It's called Invest Like a Pro. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.